pleasant good afternoon. Welcome once again to another monthly press conference by the Prime Minister of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Right Honourable Dr. Denzil L. We welcome the local press corps as well as listeners to ZIZ Radio and the television. As usual, the Right Honourable Prime Minister will make an opening statement and then will entertain questions from the local press corps. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Williams, our Press Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, good afternoon. Today, I wish to discuss the economy, crime, tourism, and education. I begin with the economy and remind us that I had stated in a number of press conferences throughout 2012 that St. Kitts and Nevis did not live in a vacuum, that the global economic crisis had indeed had a dampening effect on our economy, even though the impact had been nowhere as great as in some regional and even major industrial economies, but that 2013 would be the year in which policies and programs instituted by my government to cause an upturn in the economy would begin to bear fruits. This, federal statistics now show, is coming to pass. The International Monetary Fund, as you know, has reserved its most positive growth projection for St. Kitts and Nevis, where the nations of the Eastern Caribbean are concerned. The fund has projected a growth rate of some 1.9%. And there are certainly signs of economic exuberance in our federal statistics. For example, vehicles are up by 45%. Vehicles imports, that is. General cargo imports are up by 54%. We are importing 55% more lumber than we were doing 1 year ago. And aggregate imports are up by some 136.6%. These imports are indicative of clear demand. Demand stems from increased economic activity, and the associated multiplier effects from increased economic activity redound naturally to the benefit of the nation as a whole. There is a new wave of construction activity, the most recent examples being Ocean Grove villas on the peninsula, specifically in the Christophe Harbour development. And there is also a Canada-based Apex Capital Partners on the one hand doing this, and they are also engaged in the construction of the Windswept Residence Club, again on the Southeast Peninsula as sub-projects of the Christophe Harbour development. In addition, and in keeping with our commitment to maintain this upward trajectory, a communique was recently signed with the Republic of China on Taiwan in order to facilitate even greater activity in the areas of agriculture, tourism, and information and communication technology. A word on crime. And I emphasize that the Federation has invested heavily in domestic crime fighting equipment, in training, and manpower. Crime and criminals, however, are no longer limited to the territorial boundaries of this or any other state. Collaboration between St. Kitts and Nevis and other sovereign states in the identification and the apprehension of criminals will therefore be of increasing importance to us. With this in mind, an extradition treaty between St. Kitts and Nevis and the Republic of China, Taiwan, was signed in August 2013 during the visit of President Ma a few days ago to our federation. Looking at tourism, I again would want to emphasize that increasing airlift has always been a key component of Tourism Minister Rex Kirit's overall strategy. And through his efforts, American Airlines flights to St. Kitts and Nevis are now at their highest ever, with some 11 flights arriving per week from Miami. Twice daily flights are now available from Thursday to Sunday, with twice daily outbound flights now available to Miami from Friday to Monday. And this is key to enhancing the appeal of our tourism product. It is key, in fact, to the smooth transacting of business. And I wish to commend again our Minister of Tourism for his proactive approach and for, of course, the support of his cabinet colleagues on this very critical component of our international competitiveness. I should also add here that the flight from JFK Airport in New York to St. Kitts and Nevis is now an afternoon flight, making it possible for more travelers from more places to be able to get to St. Kitts in one day's travel. And this has direct benefits for the vast array of Kittitians and Nevisians whose income streams are directly or indirectly related to tourism. On education, St. Kitts and Nevis is outpacing the region on two crucial pillars of an educational system, of any educational system: English and mathematics specifically. We are performing 15% above the region in both areas, and our students, our teachers, and our parents are to be commended for this performance, particularly after the regional dip in English performance that caused the entire Caribbean so much concern just 1 year ago. Sorry. Not only must we commend the teachers, but also we must commend the entire education system, those in the curriculum development unit, and those in the Ministry of Education, especially the education officers, who I believe must be commended as well for the support that and the guidance and leadership that they have provided in the attainment of this important development. In closing, members of the media, I wish to note that under the leadership of Minister Nigel Carty, our CXC performance this year reflects an improvement over each of the previous 4 years. This is commendable, and so we wish to congratulate the Minister for, again, yet another milestone as we advance education in St. Kitts and Nevis for the betterment of our people. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now take your questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Sharima Matthew from the St. Kitts-Nevis Information Service. Mr. Prime Minister, recently someone suggested in an article that St. Kitts and Nevis should become a shareholder in LEAT. What are your thoughts on that? Second question, how does the recent state visit of the President of the Republic of China, Taiwan, impact the country's international profile, domestic capability, and global appeal?
Right. I would want to lump the two specific areas pertaining to the visit of President Matt together, that is the profile of our country and the global appeal. In the sense that, as you would know, the bulk of the delegation that visited with the president were people from the media. In fact, the president was accompanied by a delegation of some 150 persons, and most of them were media persons. There is no question in my mind, therefore, that the time that they have spent here in St. Kitts and Nevis with the President of the Republic of China and Taiwan would have given them the opportunity to showcase St. Kitts and Nevis not only to the people, the millions of people of Taiwan, but to the world in general. We had representatives of the international press here, and they were able to showcase St. Kitts and Nevis in a way, in an intimate way that it was never done before. Apart from that, in terms of the domestic capability, or capacity, I think it was just said, what was very stunning about this is that we had an advanced team that came here before the president's visit. They looked at what the country was like. They looked at our capabilities in several different areas. The hotel accommodation, for example. They looked at our road network. They looked at our modern telecommunication system. They looked at the security personnel, the security infrastructure. They looked at the capacity of our airport, for example, to accommodate the 747 jet that brought in the president. There's no doubt in my mind that the president's visit reaffirmed a number of things. That St. Kitts and Nevis was a secure place to live and to visit. That we were able to attract persons of the highest quality as tourists to our federation. There is no doubt that it was emphasized as well that St. Kitts and Nevis was ready to do business. To do business in a modern way, the fact that we are, I think, one of the first countries in the Caribbean, and definitely the first in the Eastern Caribbean, to be pursuing a major solar energy system that was going to provide ample electricity being generated to man the entire airport facility, and with extra going into the national grid. I think they were able to showcase that St. Kitts and Nevis was serious about lessening its dependence upon fossil fuel-based energy, and was advanced in its own quest to ensure that we become more dependent upon alternative sources of energy by way of the wind energy that we have already identified to be pursued, the solar energy, which is already bearing fruits, and of course the geothermal energy that has been promised for Nevis. In fact, if I may say, one important area that the president specifically identified was that he believed that Taiwan would be in a position to help also, not only in the solar energy plant that we were seeing being constructed, but also in wind energy, because of his own personal assessment for the short time that he was here. So that's an area that I believe he will get assistance as well. And finally, I would say, by signing the treaty with regard to extradition and the commitment that we have made on both sides, our commitment to fight crime, transnational crime, I believe that this would have put us up one notch or two in the international community with regard to our commitment to fighting international crime. The first part, the buying shares in Liat, it is something that I believe needs to be seriously considered. The government does not have the money at this time so to do, but believe that the government is in touch with agencies that may be willing to invest in Liat. And as I said to some of my own colleagues not too long ago, at the moment it is not necessarily an investment that would bring about enormous benefits, tangible monetary returns from the investment. But because of our own stated commitment to regional integration and regional development, and because we know that Liat is the only reliable regional air carrier for serving this part of the Caribbean region, we have to make sure that we can sit around the table with the shareholders when policies and plans for Liat are being developed and executed so that St. Kitts and Nevis is not left out with regard to our own share in getting the necessary flights in and out of St. Kitts by Liat in order to continue to enhance the movement of our people and the expansion of our tourism. So I support definitely investment in Liat and becoming a shareholder in Liat for these specific reasons.
Can I follow up, Prime Minister? That specific issue. Ken Richards, WinFM. You mentioned American Airlines input in the tourism sector in St. Kitts and Nevis. What about Liat's input in the tourism sector and Liat's input overall to St. Kitts and Nevis?
I think Liat's input in the development of tourism in St. Kitts and Nevis, I think, is unmatched. In fact, when we look at the arrival figures and the departure figures, the tourism figures for the region, and we will see that there has been a dip over the years, over the last year, I should say. I think to a large extent it could be attributed partly to the problems that we have had with Liat traveling in and out of St. Kitts. We know that our flights have been significantly reduced compared to previous times. We understand that Liat, of course, has had a number of teething problems in recent times. And that is why I said to my own colleagues not too long ago, even though we are not investing because of the immediate monetary return, the fact that it gives us a seat at the table where the shareholders and the directors are sitting, it therefore brings benefits to us in terms of continuing to support the tourism expansion that is absolutely necessary. And let me point out that regional tourism is a significant part of our overall tourism here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And if we do not have a regional carrier to bring our visitors from the region here, naturally we would have some problems. So I think there is a significant contribution that Liat is making for the development or in the development of St. Kitts-Nevis tourism.
Quick follow-up. A former finance minister has suggested because St. Kitts and Nevis had such a heavy burden in terms of meeting some of the expenses of Liat, that's why this country pulled out several years ago. He's suggesting the situation hasn't changed. So why would you invest in Liat?
Repeat that, sorry?
A former finance minister
yes.
has suggested that this country, St. Kitts and Nevis, had to carry a significant part of the burden of the costs associated with LIAT, and that is why the country pulled out of LIAT. The suggestion there is that up to today, LIAT is non-profitable. So why would you invest in LIAT?
No, I just said it. It is true that we were one of the countries that naturally supported LIAT. And we continue to emphasize that LIAT should be supported because of the contribution that LIAT makes to the development of tourism in St. Kitts and Nevis and also tourism within the region. As I said, it is not only looking at profits, but it is the contribution overall that LIAT continues to make. And there was a heavy subsidy that was being required of us to put forward for LIAT. We went through a period of adjustment, and we, of course, made some choices. But we are saying today that LIAT needs to continue to have our support. And if I were to be able to identify where the money can come from, I would encourage my cabinet colleagues to support an investment in LIAT. As I said, it is not only for the returns that you would have in terms of monetary returns, profits that you will get from that investment, but the overall returns you will get in terms of the continued development and expansion of our tourism here in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Janice Freelance, Scan Vibes. Last week on your Ask the Prime Minister program, when the question of legalizing same-sex marriage was asked, in your response you had mentioned the discrimination against homosexuals as well as sex workers. Is there or will there be any consideration to the legalization of prostitution? Second question, can you say when the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party will announce the candidate for St. Christopher III?
Right. The question with regard to legalizing same-sex marriage, I'm not certain if that was the question that was put by the caller. It was? I don't know. But the question was asked of me, what really would be the situation in our own country, in the government, in the legislature, with regard to same-sex marriage. And this has created quite a bit of debate and discussion, as one expected. I think the caller probably knew it was going to generate quite a bit of debate and discussion in the country. People have said that I have introduced as a smoke screen to the issues of the day. Nonsense. I didn't ask the question myself. I answered. And so I say again here that it tells you how much our people are in tune with what is happening around us in the Caribbean and in the wider Caribbean. It is because, to a large extent, it is because of the continuing search for knowledge. And we can go on the World Wide Web and we can search for knowledge. We can participate in the debate as it is taking place around us. And also our people say the debate should really come here to St. Kitts and Nevis because we are interconnected with the rest of the world. So those who are misunderstanding where we are on this matter should have it clarified. In fact, someone said yesterday, I think in my program, that priests were making negative statements about this. Let us be open-minded about this matter. Let this matter be discussed among our people, among the stakeholders. The government is not saying what its own views are at this time, because the time has not yet come. But we are saying we support the fact that there should be open, frank, and honest discussion, because homosexuality is taking place. People of St. Kitts and Nevis of the same sex are getting married in North America and in Europe. They are getting married. I can point of at least 2 to 3 people of this country who we all know who have been so-called married of the same sex, so-called sex. So I think let us not get away from this. This is already happening here in our country. And so, asks whether the discussions which have been broadened to involve my own position in pursuing the human rights of persons who are sex workers and those who are homosexuals, whether or not we are about to support prostitution in St. Kitts-Nevis. We don't support prostitution in St. Kitts-Nevis. We know it happens. We know it happens. And we are saying that with the continuing stigmatization and discrimination of persons who are involved as sex workers, and I use the term specifically sex workers, because they can have male sex workers and female sex workers. Those who are engaged in sex work for pay, those who are considered to be homosexuals and who continue to suffer at the hand of discrimination and stigmatization, so that these groups within the spectrum of the HIV/AIDS pandemic go underground and thus refuse to come out and be tested for fear of the discrimination and stigmatization against them. We say that that is not good in the management of the HIV/AIDS pandemic. And we would wish, therefore, for governments, including this one, and governments around the region, to have a very serious look at the laws which continue to be on our law books that discriminate and stigmatize such persons. And we say we should have a look by starting the debates on these issues in our country and in the region. We've seen a situation in Jamaica where, for example, the former Prime Minister of Jamaica had said, Bruce Golding had said, he will never have a homosexual in his cabinet. Today, Portia Simpson has said, I will embrace a homosexual in my cabinet. So already you can see the trend changing in the Caribbean region. And the whole idea, from my own personal perspective, is that as the champion of the HIV/AIDS management, championing its the end of discrimination associated with HIV/AIDS, and people, who are at risk for HIV/AIDS, sex workers and homosexuals. I say that we should begin the discussion on these matters here in St. Kitts and Nevis. The church must become involved because, of course, the church has been always an important social guide to our behavior as a society. So the church must become involved. Those who are very much aware of the changes that this would mean to our cultural and social norms should also become engaged in the discussion. We would want to have the various groups in our country, because there are groups of homosexuals in our country. There are groups, registered groups, because the country, the Ministry of Health, has been very open, asking people to identify your practices so that we can help. And so there are groups who we do not want to discriminate or single out. But we must make sure that they too must become engaged in the discussion. because this is really an issue that involves all of us. We would want to know that if a person is bisexual and he's having sex with his wife at home and he's also having sex with some other partner outside, a male or a female, that is important to us. Because if you condemn that person as being a homosexual, that person will be afraid and be reluctant to go and get tested. And so if he doesn't get tested and does not get the care and treatment and advice that he should get if he is positive, and he is positive but does not know because he's afraid to go and get tested because of the discrimination, the virus spreads. His wife will get it eventually, his partners, they will get it, and it spreads. That's why we are saying, be light on those who may be engaged in such activities. Discuss the issue. Stop the discrimination. Stop the stigmatization. And let us therefore discuss this matter in an open, matured, and frank way so that we can deal seriously and comprehensively with the spread of HIV/AIDS. In fact, since I made this statement, it was picked up internationally. A few days after, strange enough, I was sent a letter from Dr. Silidi of UNAIDS, who said that he was going to make representation, he was going to have a meeting, in fact, with the UNAIDS ambassador for the region to discuss what the Prime Minister of St. Kitts-Nevis had raised in a press statement. And I believe that there would be made available resources for this kind of discussion to take place in the Caribbean region. Because to a large extent, it gets down to also involving the attorneys general from the Caribbean region. Can we look at the present legislation with regard to buggery or homosexuality, the buggery law, as people call it, prostitution laws? How can you engage your own communities before it gets to the parliamentarians? Engage them in discussing this matter as a human rights issue, because people have the right to determine their own sexual preferences and sexual orientation. So this is really, it's exciting because it may sound as if it is an academic exercise, but it's more than academic, it's practical because of the consequences that we are seeing as a result of stigmatization and discrimination of persons who are at higher risk of contracting the virus and who are being pushed on the ground, not coming forward to be tested because the society condemns them. Have I answered all?
Yes, Jason Davis. Oh.
There was another one?
There was a third question? Oh, the announcement of candidate 3.
Sorry, St. Christopher. I just had here St. Christopher. It was St. Christopher 3. I didn't remember. The announcement will come in good time. I did say to people earlier there was going to be carnival in August. August is almost finished. So it might be carnival in September when the announcement is made. So give us a few more days, maybe weeks, and you will know. But I can say, definitely, the people of constituency number 3 will be thrilled, will be heartened when another Labour picnic comes on the scene for number 3. Give us time.
Jason Davis, ZIZ Radio and TV. In a similar vein to that question about constituency number 3, on my way to this press conference, I was actually stopped by a citizen who had a couple of questions. And he was wondering regarding the situation of Timothy Harris and Sam Condor, expressing their dissatisfaction with the Labour government and going over to the other side, to the opposition. He was wondering, is there any legal redress that can be taken against or towards ministers, now former ministers, who have gone against the party that had them elected? And a follow-up question, if not, can a citizen or a constituency member file an injunction or take some sort of legal action because he or she or a group did not vote for them in that capacity, and all of a sudden they're now representing them under another group? Is there legal action that can be taken?
This is a very important question because I know that it has been contemplated and it became the focus of discussion some time ago when this matter was first raised and debated in the public domain. There were people from constituency number 3 and number 7 who felt very strongly that a petition first should be pursued and brought to the attention of the MPs that they should resign. Resign because they were elected on a Labour Party ticket and they should do the ethical or the moral thing to resign if they want to change what would have been their stance when they were first elected to Parliament. And the language became very strong in those days. People began to say that, in fact, they had committed fraud, especially Harris, who had boasted that when he was elected in the last campaign, he never really asked people to elect him as a Labour candidate. He said he was asking people to elect him as Harris again. And people felt that he was a fraud as a result of getting elected, knowing he was using the resources of the Labour Party, that used all of the platform at all times. He was on the platform of the Labour Party, got himself elected. Now he said he never really got himself elected as Labour candidate. He was fooling people. He was being a fraud. And people felt very strongly that for those reasons, Harris should really resign. And people went further to say that I believe that my rights as a voter had been infringed because I did vote for this person to represent me in Parliament on the government side. And now this man is representing me from the opposition. That's not why I voted for him. And people felt very strongly whether the court could not be moved to respond to the question as to whether the court would not find them in some way to be infringing what would have been people's rights for proper representation in Parliament, having voted for them for a particular purpose. So it is one of those exercises that I believe would become part of the discussions in the law universities in the Caribbean region. But one of the things that we are seriously looking at is how we can cure this for the future. And my government feels very, very strongly that this has been a serious infraction that should not be allowed in the future. And you may never know. If we have enough time, I'm sure that we would want to bring to Parliament the appropriate legislation that deals with two things, considering what has happened. And people have called upon me from around the Caribbean saying, Pierre, you are the leading Prime Minister in the Caribbean, the longest serving. You need to cure these things because they're going to happen again. And so people have asking me to bring to Parliament legislation, firstly, that deals with crossing the floor. Any person who wants to cross the floor, having been elected in a particular way for a particular party, using a particular symbol on election day, should be made to resign. That's one. And secondly, since there is a lacuna, or I should say since there is absence in our Constitution and in any supporting legislation with regard to when a motion of no confidence should be heard in our Parliament, considering all that has now been revealed about motion of no confidence, the history that goes back to the PAM administration when they had 2 motions of no confidence, which they refused to deal with properly. And now there is one and another one, and they have not been dealt with. People are saying, maybe PM, what you should do is really discuss with your colleagues, bring in appropriate legislation, if possible, because it may need a constitutional amendment. But bring, if possible, the necessary support legislation that will specifically identify time periods when these motions should be heard. Because really, in our Constitution, there's nothing said about the motion of no confidence. All it says is that who can vote on a motion, and what the Prime Minister or the Governor General can do at the end of the vote. It doesn't really say much about motion of no confidence. And to a large extent, I say to people, why we have been able to function in St. Kitts and Nevis is because we have a unicameral system in Parliament. If I were in England, it would have been very difficult to continue to run a government because the House of Commons, where laws would have emanated, you would not be able to function unless you first determine whether you can pass that law. But here in St. Kitts and Nevis, where the senators and the elected representatives are sitting in one chamber and they can vote on everything else except the change in the Constitution, I think, and the motion of no confidence, we are able to function as normal. And that is why we emphasize again, in Parliament, we have a majority of 8 members sitting in the Parliament on the government side and only 7 on the opposition side. That's why we are able to function. That's the reality of the day.
Just wanted to clarify the second part of my question. Can a citizen or a group of citizens take some sort of legal action towards a minister who they feel has, well, for lack of a better word, betrayed them by switching parties?
If it can happen?
Yeah, can they take some sort of legal action right now at this moment?
I believe that you can. All it takes is for a pioneer to try to do it. But I believe if it is properly framed and properly researched. I don't know if Ken Richards with experience knows of any situation like that. But if there is, then we should probably try to find out.
You and your cabinet are considering a pay increase for civil servants. How far along have you reached in making this to fruition? And also there's been a lot of talk lately in the media about the health benefits of marijuana. Will your government consider the decriminalization of the plant?
Right, very, very important questions. We continue to say that as the situation improves physically, we would want the public servants and the country on a whole to benefit from this. We in the public service in particular had asked our public servants to tighten their belts. We'd asked them to forego for the last 2 years any increase in their emoluments by not taking increments. and they understood. They know that things are improving because they work the system. And we are saying that as quickly as we can, we will fulfill our obligation to review the salaries and thus allow our people to have a little more spending power, those who work in the public service and those who have pension, who are pensioners who have served. We are still committed to that, and we are close, in fact, to finalizing our plans with regard to that. I shall make, at the appropriate time, in the very, very near future, the appropriate statement pertaining to that. You work for government? I see. The decriminalization of marijuana. The government is not about to decriminalize marijuana use or marijuana growth or trafficking in marijuana. They are on our law books as being infringements of the law. And I believe they will remain. But here again, young man, that's why it is important for the debate and the discussion to start. Because it is already, as you can see, you look at the television last week, Sunday I think it was, I looked at a program where a very seriously epileptic child whose brain functioning had almost been totally destroyed was able to return to a near state of normalcy by a particular type of marijuana that was being grown that was going to enhance the child's mentation. Not the type that gives you a particular high, because you see, there are two types here. I think, genetic engineers have tampered with the marijuana plant to the point where, as you know, there are two important chemical substances that trigger different things in the brain. One component gives you a high. Another component can be used for medicinal purposes. We always knew, for example, that marijuana could be used for the treatment of glaucoma. From my studies in Jamaica, pharmacology studies, we know that. And Jamaica has had an institute developed over the years. Professor West, I think his name was, who was the expert in the study of marijuana pharmacologically. And in fact, we know that marijuana has been used in the past for the treatment of glaucoma. We have also seen in recent times marijuana being used to treat patients with severe intractable pain. Pain is so severe that even the pethidine, the narcotics that we give, the normal narcotics, don't really correct it. We've also seen marijuana use in terms of stabilizing persons who seem to have serious muscular problems, involuntary muscular reactions. And now we are seeing marijuana being experimented in the management of patients who are severely epileptic. And then, if you follow the news, either last week or this week, I remember the governor, I think it was, of New Jersey, is it? Was now, I think he did. And I saw it, they said he was about to. And I suspect he has done. He has legalized the use of marijuana in his state for the treatment of certain conditions. And so those bright students out there who are in CFBC and who are in fifth form, I want them to begin to research the very many uses of marijuana But they must also never forget that marijuana can have very serious effects on people. I have seen in my own practice people use marijuana for all their life, 60 years in Jamaica. Nothing. Fellas are normal. Well, they appear normal. But I have seen chaps, one use of the marijuana, and they go stark mad, psychotic. So we know, therefore, that in medicine we have been taught that marijuana can unmask latent, hidden mental illness that can affect the person for the rest of his life. And that is why one has to be so careful in speaking about the decriminalization of marijuana. The debate and the discussion must now start. People must understand marijuana is a plant that has medicinal uses, but it can also be a very serious trigger for mental illness. And that is why I just simply say a government must decriminalize marijuana. It doesn't work like that. Government has to do serious analysis and studies and be comfortable that we are not creating zombies in our country and we are not providing our country with a whole lot of uncontrolled mad people. It's a very serious thing.
Prime Minister, St. Kitts and Nevis has signed an extradition treaty with Taiwan. It does give this country a high profile, I guess, on the international scene in terms of the seriousness of fighting crime. But what is the relevance of that treaty? How frequently is it likely to be used, and how easy will it be to implement such a treaty?
Right. We hope that the treaty will not be used, because we hope that no criminal out there involved in international crime will see St. Kitts and Nevis as an easy haven in which to hide after committing a crime in Taiwan. And we would hope that no Kittitian citizen would think that Taiwan is an easy haven to hide after committing an international crime. So we will hope that it is not used. But it, I am sure, can be used and will be used. Even though it can be infrequent. For example, we had a number of persons extradited for so-called international crime committed in the United States since I have been the Prime Minister. I do not know if that trigger was ever used before my time. I can't recall. Or if it was, maybe very infrequently used. But it doesn't really matter to me as to how frequently it would be used or not. The fact is that we would have put in place a structure that if it becomes necessary, it is there. Because you have to make sure that there are existing laws and treaties between the two countries for this to happen. It's not a case where a country knows that a citizen or someone else in country B is residing there after committing a crime in my country and we want him. We just can't ask the government to send him. It doesn't work like that. The treaty is the basis. And then the treaty would outline the specific steps and the processes to be followed. Person has, for example, to make sure that the crime he's being accused of is one that is answerable as well in our own court system. And then he goes through a local process if he chooses to. Some people will say, well, I don't want to use up whatever money I have, and I will volunteer to go to answer the charge that is being made against me. Some people will say, well, I don't feel I'm guilty, I don't feel I committed any crime, I've been wrongly charged, and I will fight it. And the government has put in place the necessary structures to allow the person who is being charged, who is being accused of being guilty of a crime. Our system here says to him, as far as we are concerned, even though there's a treaty, you are innocent of whatever charge they are laying against you over there until you are proven guilty. So you go through a process in our court where if from the evidence, the examination of the evidence that is allowed to be brought to the court, and that evidence from the magistrate or the judge, whoever is adjudicating, sees the body of the evidence and says, boy, this is serious information. This is evidence that tells me that a crime could have been committed. And so he says the person should be prepared to go.
Could there be problems in terms of the actual extradition, because Taiwan is not recognized by all countries, and you have to say the person is in St. Kitts, transport the person from St. Kitts to Taiwan? Could there be complications?
I don't think so. St. Kitts-Nevis recognizes Taiwan as a sovereign country. There are some countries that don't, but we do. And maybe you could be alluding to the fact that maybe a Taiwanese, let us say a Taiwanese is in St. Kitts, he needs to go back to Taiwan to answer charges, and he has to transit through another territory, and that territory does not recognize Taiwan as a sovereign nation, and you can have a problem. For example, in granting a visa, let us say he has to transit to the United States. He may have a problem in getting a visa. But I believe, given the support of the United States of America, support in fighting international and transnational crime, that person would be allowed transit. Maybe not being given a visa, but allowed for his aircraft to land. He held in so-called custody until the aircraft is again ready to leave. I believe the United States will facilitate in that way. So even though there might be problems of sovereignty among the states, the Taiwan requesting state and the transiting state, I believe accommodation can be made.
Another quick question, if you don't mind. The situation with the indigenous banks in Anguilla and the action taken by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, do you have a comment on that? And is there any concern that any indigenous bank in St. Kitts and Nevis could suffer a similar fate?
Right. I must say that currently I am the chairperson of the Monetary Council, and so I was one of those who made the initial announcement to inform the public that the Monetary Council was lending support and was basically directing the bank to take over, the central bank that is, to take over those two banks in Anguilla. Because we as a Monetary Council had been monitoring the situation in those two banks for some time, for well over, I'm sure, close to 2 years, if not more. And we had reached to the point where we realized if we did not intervene at this particular time, depositors would have lost their money. So it was to save the depositors' money that we really intervened. We realized that the bank was no longer solvent. The central bank said, what is going to happen here? A man is going to go to the bank. He's going to ask for his money. He can't get it. It's going to lead to a cascading effect. Everybody will then go and demand their money, and they can't get it. The bank fails. So we, as a responsible council, decided to step in now, take over the management of the bank, put in a new board of directors and a new management. And central bank decided to control, to return confidence to the depositors that here is your central bank intervening to make sure that your money remains safe. So this intervention was critically important, and so far I have had no untoward report as to the unfolding. I believe since they have gone in and they are now not only relying on on-site inspection or off-site inspection, but actually involved in the management of the bank. Whatever misconceptions there might have been, by now those would have been corrected, and we would have a true picture of what the situation is. And the next step, of course, would be to make sure that a number of other interventions take place, again, to safeguard and ensure that people's deposits are safe, and also to insist that those who have borrowed depositors' money, that they must know they are obligated to pay. That is also important, because that breakdown must not take place, where you would have taken people's money, you're not returning it, they go to get their money from the bank as depositors, they can't get it. That can't happen. The situation with regard to St. Kitts and Nevis.
Before you go to St. Kitts, Prime Minister, very quickly,
yes.
At least one official is crying foul, the former chairman of the CCB. He is suggesting that that particular bank, the Caribbean Commercial Bank, has been treated unfairly because recommendations were made by the ECCB some time ago, and they were implementing those recommendations. They had, in fact, implemented some and were in the process of putting others in place.
I don't think it is fair to say that anything foul has happened. Maybe the chairman had his own timetable. The Central Bank and the Monetary Council, having examined and having been advised that this is a situation that can collapse upon us, we had to intervene at a time when we did. I can tell you that a number of suggestions were made for quite a while. One of the suggestions, for example, was that because we had too many banks, indigenous banks, in the currency union, we needed for the owners of these banks to recognize that they need to come together. One of the important plans that we developed coming out of the recession when it started was that there should be an attempt to amalgamate the indigenous banks in the currency union. We thought we would have had 3 clusters of banks. One in the north, St. Kitts-Nevis, Antigua, as possibly one grouping. St. Kitts and Nevis was also, and Anguilla was also identified to become involved through our national bank with those 2 banks in Anguilla. There was a serious plan that was being developed to have the St. Kitts-Nevis Anguilla National Bank lend amalgamation initiatives to those 2 banks. So that was one of the things we were working on. But those things take a long time because the mindset of the owners of the bank, shareholders represented by their directors, it has to be right. And that has been long in coming. So that is why we had to take this alternative route in order to save people's money. Because we are not into allowing people's money to be lost, especially having seen what had happened with CLICO and BICO, where people have lost millions of dollars. We just couldn't stand by to see what had happened. And we saw what had happened in Antigua with the Stanford Bank and then the Abib. So we knew what we had to do because we had done it before successfully. We stabilized the situation in Antigua, and we felt very strongly that we will do the same thing for Anguilla to ensure that they do not lose, the depositors, that is, do not lose their savings that they had placed into the bank.
The local situation?
Sorry? The local situation, that at the moment I have no fear. That is why, you see, when we decided to get involved with the IMF to support our new economic development package, we negotiated strenuously for a facility that was to lend support to the banking sector. And so every IMF test that we pass, it allows access to money which is being put aside to ensure any negative effect on the banking sector. Because you see, there was a time, when our political opponents foolishly were calling on people to remove their money from the National Bank. Now, we heard those things, so we couldn't just simply stand by and hear these crazy things and don't do anything. And we said to the IMF, we want you to assist us. We are the largest indigenous bank in the Eastern Caribbean. If this bank was to have any negative effect from what we are doing, it will cause other banks to tumble down. And thank God, knock on wood, up to today, we've not had the opportunity to reach into those funds. They are there, waiting at the central bank to be used in case there is any negative fallout and having effect on that bank. Thank God, people have been sensible. The bank has been doing well. We've not had at any time to rely on the monies that had been set aside by the IMF, deposited in our central bank to safeguard the interest of the depositors. And so I can say to you, at the moment, there are 2 indigenous banks in St. Kitts, because the other indigenous banks in St. Kitts have been, in a way, amalgamated with regional and international banks. So there are only 2. That is Bank of Nevis and St. Kitts-Nevis Anguilla National Bank. And I want to say to the depositors of these 2 institutions, your deposits are safe. Your deposits are safe, and there's no need for you to panic. I won't even say if you panic, there's a reserve fund there. I won't even say that, because we have not had any opportunity whatsoever to touch what we call the Financial Sector Stabilization Fund. It's still there.
Good afternoon. Javon Alford from the Labour spokesman. Just 2 quick questions. Mr. Prime Minister, a former member of the government has recently passed some remarks, some unkind remarks regarding the Republic of Cuba. What I would like to know, how did the government deal with this? How do they plan to deal with the situation? And how would this affect the relationship between the Federation and the Republic of Cuba? Second question, I'm sure maybe you answered this question on a different occasion, but how do you feel about the opposition saying that they were not invited to the Taiwanese president visit to the island?
Well, I consider, let me answer the second question first. I consider the stance taken by the opposition, really, as a stance of almost spoiled children and political infants. because you have taken a stand in the country. Serious matters are up for debate in your parliament, including the budget. You refused to come into the parliament to negotiate the budget, to participate in serious discussions on laws which are being passed in your parliament. You say you're boycotting the parliament because the government is a minority government. And you want to break your boycott just to come and have a dinner with the president of Taiwan and to go up to the airport and wave when he arrives on the plane. So you prefer, it would appear, to hobnob with the president rather than to represent your people in parliament. But the people didn't elect you to go up to the airport and wave and sit around a table and eat. That's not what they elected you for. You were elected to do the people's business. And that is why I keep saying to the people of St. Kitts-Nevis, the parliamentarians on the opposite side, they are jokers. They're not serious about doing the people's business in the parliament. They're interested only in social gatherings, it would appear. When we were debating the budget, what did they do? They went up into the OTI and had a kangaroo press conference up there. No seriousness about what they have put in parliament to do. But now you're going all over the world, making noise. Oh, we should have been invited. They seem to have forgotten that when Taiwan brought a trade show here involving our private sector, our businessmen, our traders, with Taiwanese traders living in Puerto Rico, in Miami, and in Taipei, they brought them here to interact so that they can do business with the businessmen of St. Kitts and Nevis. Well, wasn't it the opposition that was outside the Jakta Hotel demonstrating against the Taiwanese businessmen who were here? They really thought that they were demonstrating against Douglas? They were demonstrating against the Taiwanese. They hurt the pride of the Taiwanese people. That's what they did. Because people, political infants like Lindsey Graham and John L. Powell, who just come, who don't understand politics in this country, thought that the way to get involved in the politics of the country and to get into CNN and to get onto the international media is to stage a demonstration when the Taiwanese businessmen were here. What they expect? And they're not even together, because Vance Amory, the premier, was there in everything. He was at the airport waving. He was at the lunch. He was at the dinner that was put on by His Excellency the Governor General. So what Hamilton want to get in there for? We invited the Honourable Mark Brantley as the representative of the opposition team. He refused to come. So what they're talking about? If they wanted to be there, they could have been at the Marriott Hotel when the president was passing to do a wave to him as well. So that is why I dismiss this as just political infantry. Or infancy, I should say, sorry. Political infancy. So I don't know where they're balling for. Huh? The matter on Cuba, I have said so much about this matter in the past. I had to go and reassure the Cuban ambassador and the Cuban people, the doctors and so who are serving here. Don't worry. the views expressed by Timothy Harris is an isolated view. And you can hear for yourself the condemnation that is coming from the whole country, because we want to maintain the relationship with you. And that is why, again, I say that Timothy Harris should be ashamed of himself. And I'm ashamed of him as being a former representative of this government, sitting as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Education. Because the ridicule and the scorn that he has poured on Fidel Castro and Raul Castro and the government and the people of Cuba, it was uncalled for. The unkind remarks that he made about our students going off to Cuba to study. They ain't went there to study no communism. They ain't coming back here to force the communism on the people. These are doctors and nurses, engineers, serving in all spheres of development in our country. Why does he have to do that? Because he's under pressure with this leadership that he's looking for in this unity that is so elusive. After all, if you become frustrated, go home and sleep. That is what I advise as a medical doctor. Go home and sleep if you are frustrated. Don't take off your frustration on the people of Cuba and the students of St. Kitts-Nevis who have gone to Cuba to study. And that is why I had to say that he's a pancake. He's a flip-flop. That's why I had to say it. He's a flip-flop and he's a pancake. Let's move on.
Mr. Prime Minister, next month we celebrate the 30th anniversary of independence under the theme Stability, Creativity and Prosperity, Independence 30. In your opinion, how does this theme reflect the past of the evolution of the nation and the prospects for continued growth?
I think it is a very solid theme, and I want to commend the young man, I can't remember his name now, who had the vision and the intellectual capacity to really put the theme together, which embodies all that we have stood for, what we stand for today, and what we will stand for in the future. St. Kitts-Nevis is really poised, I believe, for greater economic development, social and political development, as we leap forward from the 30th anniversary of our independence. I think the foundation has been laid after 30 years. I want to commend the Simmons government for bringing us into independence. People describe him as the midwife because he delivered independence, but the father is really Bradshaw and Southwell and so forth. So I want to commend him nevertheless. I also want to say that a foundation has been laid. Of course, the latter part of building that foundation has been with the Labour Party government. And as we spring forward after 30 years and 18 years of that 30 years under Labour, after going through the economic turmoil that we have seen, we are poised to achieve greater things. So if there was a pause as a result of the global economic downturn, you're going to be pushing the start button again. Our human resource is being prepared for the task at hand. We will never fail the young people of this country in ensuring that They continue to build on the academic achievements displayed recently in their examinations overseas. We will continue to make sure that those who have not been that fortunate and may have dropped out, and those who maybe, even though they were successful and did not have a particular skill, that they are being provided the opportunity through the PEP to acquire that skill. Remember what I said, the SIDF, the role of the SIDF was to assist in the transformation out of a sugar agriculture era to a modern era where the economy is being led by services. We want to make sure, again, that the human resource of our country is well prepared for the future. We have a 12% graduation, or 12% of our graduates, I should say, from secondary school are going on to tertiary level education. That's not enough for our future. That has to be increased and improved upon. And the government will do everything it can to ensure that there is improvement with regard to the number of persons leaving secondary school and going on to tertiary level education. That is why, for example, we are moving from being granting associate degrees to full degrees. That's going to happen in nursing. It's already happening, I think, in social studies. It's happening in teaching. We want to have many more of our people being able to access, and we believe that the open university campus, the open campus at the University of the West Indies will be able to help us to achieve those things. The laptops in the high schools, they will leapfrog our people. The housing sector development, our people have to be appropriately sheltered. I want to share something with you. 3 weeks ago, I addressed a camp for about 21 boys in St. Paul's. I asked them, how many of you here at home don't have flush toilets? No hand went up. How many of you here, coming from homes in St. Paul's, that have to wash on hand in the old way that we used to wash? None of them. All of them have washing machines, even if the washing machine is outside of the main house. How many of you don't have television? They laughed at me. They said, we have 2 and 3, Mr. Prime Minister. Now, I make reference to that because it shows you how our people have improved. St. Paul's was one of the most depressed communities, kept back by the PAM administration. Not even one house was built down there. One affordable house was built in the whole constituency for 15 years of PAM. In the most depressed constituency, not even one house was built there. I went through Basseterre, West Basseterre, on Saturday, and there are still families who are using outside latrines. Those things have to end. And I give a commitment that we, as a Labour government, will bring those things to an end. Sanitation and proper hygiene and hygienic methods have to be applied across the board in this country. And so we are setting the pace to do all of these things, social human development, over the next few years, leaving from where we are at 30. I think I'm going to stop here. Anything else?
Thank you very much, members of the media. We welcome you, not welcome you, but we thank you very much for coming for another monthly press conference by the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis as we return you back to your respective studios. Thank you.